Banzai!
To baby trees.
Bonsai! Banzai!
Bonsai.
It's almost like once you start doing it, you almost have to. Like it's.
Bonsai!
He takes his hand and grabs his hat on top of his head while he's looking at it.
The Black Pondo Podcast.
You can ask me anything. I'll talk about whatever.
Nice. Okay. Today, I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about you, get some of your background, talk about what you're up to today, maybe kind of like your leap to becoming a bonsai professional. Was hoping to talk about bonsai in SoCal a bit, oaks for bonsai, grafting conifers. I know that we share some of the same opinions and philosophies there. And then, if we go down any other rabbit hole, I'm totally good with that.
Okay.
But just kind of to kick us off, would you give me an overview on kind of like how you got into bonsai and who you've studied with?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my interest in bonsai kind of began right when I was getting out of high school. I have kind of this, offshoot, this tangential story. But in high school, I had this part-time job working for this cutlery dealer, and they would basically sell, custom knives or kitchen knives from various sources and makers, and I would just kind of handle their advertising and some of their sales, stuff like consignment. And when I was doing that job, I was really interested in seeing a lot of these custom knife makers use these wooden blanks, for their knife handles that they would carve or mill out the handle out of. And typically they were made from these highly figured pieces of wood, usually made from burls or something with some kind of curly wave in it or some interesting grain line. And my concept of just wood was, something from Home Depot and, just some typical construction wood. So when I saw that, I was very curious as to where it came from and what kind of tree and what part of a tree, right? I didn't know what burls even were. So this kind of spun off to this kind of side interest where I would look at trees, not for bonsai, but to seek out pieces of figured wood, right? I would look up into a tree and I'm like, oh, there's a burl there, or this section of the wood is curly. These would be interesting pieces to use for wood working. So I've kind of gained this habit, not directly related, but just the habit of studying trees. Kind of from then, and this is the kind of story I tell people of how I got interested in bonsai, but I was surf fishing with my dad. This is after I graduated high school, and we liked to look for stones on the beach, not suiseki per se, right? It's just anything we liked, so nothing refined. But I remember I found something that was kind of reminiscent of a cliff, right? Just some large, bulky rock kind of boulder. And why I took it home, and I had this idea that if we were able to put a tree on it, right, it would very realistically convey this image of some kind of coastal tree on a cliff and portray that sense of scale. So kind of that very day I looked up how do you put a tree on a rock, right? And one of the top results on Google was bonsai, and immediately when I saw that, right, I just knew this was it, and I was hooked. So kind of going through college, right, it was just this big rabbit hole of a hobby and a passion, and I just read and learn, anything I could about bonsai and just kind of mass consumption of anything on the internet. And it got to the point where I was just entertaining this idea in my head of people can do this professionally, right? Especially in Southern California, we have a lot of bonsai practitioners and some professionals. And kind of it's another story in itself, but kind of through that pursuit of that interest and many people who helped kind of refer and recommend me eventually led me to pursuing an apprenticeship where I studied at Fujikawa Kokaen in Osaka, Japan.
Very interesting how you initially got into bonsai. Personally, like I'm very into different types of wood as well. Really nice wood. Always enjoyed burl and flame maple. I kind of learned about that initially through guitars, like electric guitars and acoustic guitars. Um, but I definitely am interested now more so in high quality wood with bonsai stands. So it's cool that that kind of
Yeah.
translated over for you. And then,
Yeah.
are you still into suiseki and stones as well?
Yes. Yeah. I to be honest, my knowledge in Suiseki is very limited. Kind of, this is kind of funny when I was in Japan and I asked my senpais, like, how do you know if this Suiseki is good or not? And he told me it's good if you like it, right? And that's kind of my extended knowledge of Suiseki. So I'll find some kind of interesting lines or some kind of shape for whatever arbitrary reason kind of speaks for me. So I do definitely appreciate it, but I can't really claim to be knowledgeable in that aspect.
I'm not very knowledgeable either, but I actually really love that quote. It's good if you like it. I think that applies to bonsai as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
most important thing.
Uh-huh.
And then I was curious, so in college, did you have bonsai trees? Because I know I had one
Yeah.
when I went to UCSB, and I'm pretty sure one of my housemates watered it with their beer at a party, and it died. So it's hard to keep bonsai in college, I feel like,
Yeah.
for most people.
Yeah, I mean, for any student or young working adult, especially if you're traveling, it's pretty. I mean, bonsai likes stability, right? They need some daily care, and you need to kind of pay attention to how it's responding in the season. I mean, over college, I did have trees, but basically I just left them at home. And sometimes my parents helped me water them, or I'd come back on the weekend here and there and check on them. I remember I used a automatic irrigation system at one point, and I got one of those Wi-Fi kind of timers. So I would look on my phone, kind of the weather in the area where my parents were living, and if it seemed like the trees needed water, then I can just tap from my phone and they would get watered. Definitely hard to develop and kind of maintain trees though, especially if you're gone most of the time. Just doesn't really translate well for bonsai practice.
Very cool. And you don't have to dive super far into it, but was just curious about your time at Fujikawa Koka-en. So you were there for about 2 years, is that correct?
Yeah, so it was the kind of the month right after I graduated college. I flew over there and kind of started my apprenticeship and just came right back at the start of COVID. When I started at Kokaen, there was technically I was just the one apprentice there. There's my senpai, Naoki Maoka-san, really talented and nice guy. He was there as well. He had been there for well over 10 years, so he was kind of, I mean, did a lot for my boss. So initially when I started, there's a little bit of overlap where he was my senpai and he kind of helped me out. There is some kind of brief periods where it was just me. Essentially, I think Maoka-san he wanted to leave, but I mean, you can't really just, especially he's like Japanese, right? And he can't just be like, well, I'm out of here, screw you kind of thing. He has to make sure the nursery's in good standing. There's apprentices to take over the work. So kind of I was there for a bit, and then later, Kaya, right? It was kind of funny. I had initially sent Kaya my trees when he was at Boone's to board them for me because they kind of offered to hold it. And then kind of 6 months later, he like messaged me and he's like, "Oh, I want to come to Japan also." And right, so he came later, and then we got another guy from Canada, Michael Mateague, a really nice guy and pretty skilled as well. So, I mean, it was in kind of hindsight, really, I was not there that long. I mean, the 2 years go by really fast. But overall, I would say it was, of course, a hard experience, but was able to learn quite a lot in a short time, participate at Taikon 10, Kokufu, essentially just worked on and churned out a lot of trees, kind of for Kokuen's business model, where we are essentially evaluating what our good trees in the sense of the work they may entail and how you can leverage your skills and say within ideally a 1 year time span or less and to sell it and flip it. So for kind of Kokan's business model, right, the apprentices are getting tons of trees just churned through the nursery. You get to work on a lot of stuff, a lot of wiring, and that was kind of like a big focus during the apprenticeship.
Very cool. I've absolutely enjoyed following all your work while you were at Fujikawa Koken, and I love following, Kaya's work on Instagram and Bjorn's videos that he's posted. Looks like they have some really incredible material over there, and that's got to be just an awesome experience that you had for 2 years.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Since you've been back, I noticed you're kind of all over California, but definitely up at Peter T's house up in Auburn, California, which is quite a ways from you.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about you and Peter's relationship?
Sure, yeah. So the first time I met Peter was actually at the Kokufu. So I was there, and I can't remember which Kokufu number it is, but it was in 2019. I was out there right on the vendor's table. It was snowing and cold, and just kind of right, just doing apprentice duties. And of course, as a hobbyist, right, I followed Peter's blog, right? For most bonsai
Great blog.
enthusiasts, right? That was arguably maybe the best bonsai blog in terms of the quality and content of the information. So really, kind of top-notch stuff for any kind of hobbyist trying to just learn some techniques or concepts in bonsai. So I was basically knew of Peter before and kind of respected his approach and kind of work style. So I met him at Kokufu, kind of introduced myself very briefly, but it was a really kind of short interaction, right? I'm just there working, and he was kind of showing some people around, I think doing some kind of tour. So maybe it was like a 10-minute conversation. And when I came back from Japan, right? So this is the start of 2020, kind of around when COVID was getting started. I knew just from from my experience apprenticing, like the more you understand like in depth in bonsai, the more you realize like how much you don't know, that the skill ceiling and the depth of knowledge is almost to where you cannot know everything, but it's just kind of overwhelming. And for me, especially as an aspiring professional, right, I was always seeking to be the best I possibly can, right, really learn the techniques and my skill set. And I knew that 2 years out of Japan, right, it was not enough. So I think I emailed Peter, and I told him exactly that. I said, we talked briefly. I was there for 2 years, but I still, in some kind of effect, want to continue my study. And initially, I just asked him, can I just join one of your workshops or something? And Peter was very gracious and nice to me. And he gave me kind of this, I guess, professional courtesy where he told me, it's like, well, you're not just some whatever hobbyist or customer. You are trying to like do this professionally. He's like, just come up here, we can chat and just help me on some stuff. And then I basically kind of just learn from him and do whatever. So I think from the start of COVID for the past, I guess almost like 3 years now from the start of COVID. That's crazy. And I would go to Peter's place about 1 weekend a month, right? A crazy drive from LA, right? And I would just keep on going back and forth. So, and for me, that was, really great just to kind of see Peter's work, his philosophy on his trees and his approach. And essentially I feel I can fill in some gaps in my knowledge and kind of improve my skills continuously. And that was an important aspect for me. So I appreciate Peter a lot for doing that.
That's fantastic. And I really respect that you are doing that. I feel like any professional within any industry, I mean, we should always, well, they should always be learning. You can never master everything.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and so I really like that you are continuing your education. And I also think that Peter is really good about that. Like, I've definitely heard him say, hey, I picked up this new technique, and he's always trying to improve his skills, I know. And so I'm a big fan of Peter's work, most definitely. What is it about Peter's work for you specifically that you really like?
I mean, my impression initially was from his blog, but there's kind of a few aspects that kind of spoke to me. I mean, one, it was technically very clean. In my kind of personal philosophy and approach to bonsai is that bonsai is not a pure art form, right? It's not, as we may think, a sculpture or painting where we can kind of make in one iteration. It is forever changing, no matter what, right? And that's just the reality of a living tree. So if we try to create bonsai in some a pure pursuit of aesthetic, right? Just some kind of art, but abandon that aspect of the craft and the sustainability of the tree. It's just my opinion, but I think you end up with a diluted kind of half-assed version of bonsai. So I first kind of really respected that, his technique in application was extremely clean. And he's always kind of explaining, what he does and this concept of kind of sustainability, right? And where your bonsai is just not a one-time thing, right? How do you build upon the tree? How do you improve the tree so it gets better and better and better? And that was something that kind of really, resonated with my mindset and approach to bonsai. And I knew that, if I could kind of pick up some of Peter's approach and his skill, it would kind of serve me well and kind of well-rounding my skills in that aspect.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love his approach. I mean, I think he's good at everything too, which is part of the reason I love to learn from him. Both
Mhm.
deciduous and conifer, he's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Does some broadleaf evergreen stuff as well. And clean. I feel like that's a great way to describe his
Oh,
work.
yeah, yeah.
Perfect. So what kind of work are you doing now as a professional? And what type of work are you open to? I know you're
Um,
traveling all over
yeah,
California.
yeah. So since I committed to bonsai full time, right? Because the past a few years is kind of like my side hustle while doing a full time job, kind of more related in my college background. But from 2022 in July, I quit my job and just started doing only bonsai work. A lot of traveling, mainly in California. So I'll have workshops and study groups. Study groups I have mainly right now just in Southern California. The way I kind of differentiate study groups from workshops. Workshops are kind of more one-off, where maybe you're with a new group or a larger club. Study groups, there's a sense of consistency in terms of you have the same pool of members and you progress the trees they work on, which for me is a much kind of better approach than a one-off work, because most bonsai work is not realized in a single session. So doing a bit of that. I would say I'm doing mostly private work, right? So just one-on-one with people's collections in Southern California, and I'm traveling a bit throughout Fresno and a little bit on the coast. Um, so pretty much in any and everything for work right now. I mean, I'll sell trees, do consignment, and just travel where anybody wants me. So pretty much open to any kind of work requests. People can just contact me from social media or whatever.
Solid, solid. I like it. Yeah, I've been following you on Instagram. I love the work that you've been doing at the Clark Collection.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
some of the I've seen a few California junipers that you've worked on recently that I was very impressed with. I saw you and Kaya going back and forth on one of them.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Work looked solid. And then I also saw, were you just down in San Diego doing a lecture on deciduous?
Yeah, so San Diego's a big, well, it's the biggest club in Southern California. It's just that one club kind of serving all of San Diego County. But they have great people leading the club, a lot of layers in the membership, so kind of beginner, intermediate teachers and different resources they offer. So they are what I would describe as a healthy bonsai club. So they have 400 members, right? Kind of
Wow.
pretty stable, so they can pull a lot of people. Yeah, recently I did. It was kind of a half presentation, half demo. And you mentioned, or I wrote basically a blog post recently where, I talk not so much on the techniques of building deciduous trees because it will be kind of very species specific, stage of development, that kind of thing, but more just on the principles of building deciduous bonsai, which is something I feel is not really talked about that much, at least in the US. I mean, we have a lot of deciduous hobbyists and professionals, I mean, many of which who do very good work. But a lot of times people are so kind of focused and narrowed in on, I have this fancy technique or I do this to my tree, and or maybe it's just some kind of fancy wiring of a deciduous tree, which, I don't quite agree with entirely. But I think it's for any concept in bonsai, you just need to understand, why are you doing it? What are the effects of the work and kind of that long-term progression. So essentially, I gave them this presentation where I talked about principles of building deciduous trees, how you develop branches, and kind of compare the Penjing and bonsai model, which for me, I feel, the philosophy and approach is a little different, but the core of the technique is the same. And we can kind of get into that later if we can.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. In fact, well,
Yeah.
yeah, let's come back to that. Let's come
Okay.
back to that
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to talk about your article a little bit more because I was very impressed with that article. I read it and I thought you had a lot of really cool points on it. I love the graph that you covered or the chart that you entered there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Um, yeah, before we get into that though, one question I had is there any type of work that you feel like maybe you specialize in? Or maybe another way of asking the question
Mhm.
is there any type of work that you don't really do, bonsai
That's,
wise?
yeah. Yeah, because I don't know if I have a specialty per se. I mean, I'm trying in a sense to do everything. So right. I mean, I try to do deciduous work as best I can, and then same with conifers, wiring, anything. So I don't know if I have a specialty per se. I try my best, right, to kind of do the full range of everything that's out there. In terms of work I don't do, I don't know if there's anything like specific that comes to mind because I will basically try to do every kind of work I can get. I would say I don't necessarily work on, I mean, I work on Yamadori sometimes, but I don't have a huge amount of kind of raw material to develop. And in part, it's just I'm not collecting too much, and the raw material is just out of my affordability right now. But kind of outside of that, I pretty much will just work on any and everything, which was also a big part of why I kind of try to further my education, studying a bit with Peter. We have another local professional in Southern California. He also studied in Japan, John Wong. And well, I've kind of been in contact with him since before I went to Japan, and kind of here and there will pick his brain or do some work for him. So kind of best as I can over the years, I try to fill in any kind of gaps I feel is missing.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. Another question I had for you was, is there anything specifically with bonsai that you are really looking to accomplish? Maybe long term, maybe short term. Any goals that you have specifically?
Yeah, a big kind of project for me right now, and this is just because I'm based in Southern California, is really kind of like upping the bonsai game here and kind of the understanding of bonsai. I mean, and technically in the US, I think bonsai started in Southern California. It was that very early waves. Japanese immigrants. Those early clubs were kind of I mean, of course, I wasn't alive then. This is what people tell me, but it's pretty much Japanese only, right? They didn't let anybody else in. So it's very kind of exclusive. So in a sense, they were just serving their own community, and it doesn't have that much of a relation to the then kind of broader growth of bonsai in the U.S. But we have a very old bonsai history in Southern California. And the thing that, and I think other professionals here feel maybe a little similar, was despite having this significant time advantage of the practice of bonsai here, I kind of hate to say it, but the skills and kind of the trees here have not progressed that much over the years. So for me, both as for me to work and survive here as a professional, but also to try to grow the community. I really kind of would like to see the level of bonsai rise here, just see some better trees show up. And it's not that, everybody needs to spend a ton of money on bonsai and we have this kind of elitist, outlook on trees. Really anybody can work on bonsai, and my kind of core philosophy is just teaching bonsai as a process. I mean, if you're so dialed in on this kind of end result and your trees have to look good on all the time, I mean, you're not going to have a good time in bonsai, because just sometimes those results just take a long time. But even from like mediocre material, I mean, if you enjoy the process and you're in for the long game, then I mean, the trees will get better and better. So kind of hoping to, grow my presence here, but also involve myself in this community and just see this level of bonsai rise in the area.
That's fantastic. I feel like if anywhere needs it, Southern California definitely could use leaders and bonsai professionals. And I know that John Naka and his kind of crew was very big, and they did a great job back in the day. But it seems like it's just ripe for a new generation to take over, and I think that's where you come in.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about bonsai in SoCal specifically. So I was just thinking the other day, in my life, I've only actually lived in two bordering counties,
Yeah.
even though I've traveled a lot throughout California, but I've only lived in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. And I've only grown bonsai in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties.
hmm
Uh, it's our climate is somewhat like SoCal. I mean,
Yeah, it's
there's
not
definitely
too dissimilar. Yeah.
yeah. I think our temperature doesn't maybe fluctuate quite as much. Like probably gets hotter in the summertime.
hmm
However, there's lots of microclimates and
Yeah.
different climates within Southern California, right?
Uh-huh. That's right.
So that just makes me very curious about bonsai in Southern California, and I'm always curious about what's working well there because I can model after that and use those things. So I guess first off, would you maybe start off by just explaining what types of trees tend to grow well in Southern California from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's officially right a Mediterranean climate, but there's a lot of microclimates, right? And it depends on your proximity to the ocean. So you could kind of be right on the coast and have that consistent marine layer in the summer, very mild conditions year round. So your kind of range of temperature from the absolute low to the high throughout the year is not too far apart. I mean, you go a little bit inland and you don't get affected by that coast as much, especially you start heading towards the valleys. It'll get very hot in the summer, maybe a touch cooler in the winter, but on a typical winter, right, we don't see below 45 degrees. And that will kind of vary, of course, where you're located as well in terms of elevation and how deep you are in the valley. And we have some kind of mountain foothill communities as well. Not necessarily so high in elevation, maybe like 1,000 feet. And of course that gets, similar climate to the valleys, just a touch colder in the winter. So in some sense, we can grow a lot of trees here. I mean, anything short of trees that need a good hard freeze, like a cold dormancy, will grow in Southern California. The main issue that I have come across and for my study groups is water quality, especially if you like deciduous trees. Water quality is a deal breaker, right? If your kind of dissolved salts is very high, water is very alkaline, high pH. I mean, like the maples and stuff, they just have a hard time. They look like crappy around, and they're just very susceptible to disease, getting weak, and just dying. Um, so if you like deciduous and you live in Southern California, either you live in a region that has a little bit better water quality or has maybe some local groundwater source, or you do RO, right? So that's why usually we see a lot of junipers in Southern California, because for most people, junipers are very hardy. They tolerate a wider range of water qualities, kind of more forgiving. So we have a lot of people who kind of focus more on that coniferous aspect. Junipers and black pine seem to do pretty well here. Deciduous is hit or miss, right? It depends where you live and your kind of climate and water quality.
Would you say, do most people, are they not able to grow Japanese maples down in Southern California for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the most part, yeah. Like if you pull like 10 hobbyists from some random club, maybe like three of them. I mean, that's like totally arbitrary. But just kind of from what I've seen from my own groups, it's definitely a smaller percentage that can do kind of maples or kind of similar deciduous varieties, just because the local climate and the water is just too unforgiving, where the trees are just not hardy.
And what about hornbeam and Chinese quince?
They seem more hardy than Japanese maples. Quince, I would say, any of like these, kind of like when I look at the leaves and they're like thicker, more waxy, so kind of like a lot of broadleaf evergreens. Quince is a deciduous, right? But the leaves are much more robust compared to a maple. They seem, for whatever reason, more tolerant of kind of a high TDS level, dissolved salt level in the water. So I would say those seem to be better than maples, but still are kind of like subject to the same problems maples have. I mean, where I'm located right now, and I have, a pretty wide range of deciduous trees. In part, the area of LA County I'm in, the water quality is not that bad actually, but I kind of just made the conversion a few years ago, and I just use RO water, reverse osmosis, for most of my trees, and just because the ease of care and the health was just so much better that I can't go back. Yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed that a lot of Southern California bonsai nurseries,
Hmm.
when I look at just even the pots, for example, there's
Yeah.
always like a white residue
Yeah.
on them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
got that for a long time
Uh-huh.
as well. And that can't be great for your trees. I don't know. I've heard that it actually coats the root, which I'm not sure if that is actually what is happening or not, but can't be good
Yeah, I
for your
mean,
trees.
yeah, I mean that part I'm not too sure. I mean essentially the common issues I mean we see with water, I mean there's two things, right? The TDS, the total dissolved salts, and then your pH. Um, if your salt level is very high, I mean the way I see it, because I mean, I might be wrong on this. I'm not totally sure. But right, water is just right diffusing through the roots. It's just kind of this permeable membrane. And if your salt level is very high, the mobility of the water in the plant is just not as efficient. Not only that, is that you have essentially all these different competing nutrients that are being taken up by the roots. Some maybe the plant needs, some it doesn't. But if you have like the wrong balance and ratio, right, you can get stunted growth, maybe some kind of like phytotoxicity. The reason why people say generally, right, that low pH is better than say like high pH alkaline water water is that pH is determining the solubility of all the kind of salts and elements in your water, right? So at a high pH range, and this is kind of what we commonly see, magnesium, calcium, right, is very abundant and present in the water, but we have very low levels of, say, iron and zinc. That's why if you go to any commercial nursery and you buy a soil acidifier, it'll be some kind of iron blend micronutrient or something, basically just to compensate for that range of essentially nutrients in the water, which is not very accessible for the plant. But trees kind of have their sweet spot and their range they like. Of course, in the ground, plants are much more hardy, right? The roots kind of have leeway to seek out the resources they need. But once you confine things in a pot and your TDS level's really high, I mean, the trees just suffer. They just don't like it at all.
Totally. So you currently are using an RO system to basically filter and clean your water. What's your setup look like?
So I bought essentially, right, so like the RL system, it's essentially, it's using water pressure. It's kind of the brute force method of cleaning water. So you'll use like your city water pressure. It kind of forces water through this membrane, right? And you get this clean water on the other end. And then there's a second line of water that kind of back flushes itself. It cleans the membrane. So it kind of self-replenishes, right? So I have my RO unit, and there's two lines, a waste line, which all the salts are going into, and actually redirect that into the landscape. Things in the ground will tolerate a very high TDS, no problem. And my clean water, right, I fill into this, it's just a trash can, right, a 55-gallon trash can. When you run water through RO system, it's essentially, I mean, there's a little bit of dissolved salts in there, but it's basically just water, right, for the most part, which that on its own is not necessarily good. I mean, your trees still need, some small trace amounts of different micronutrients. If you gave them just pure, say like pure rainwater the whole year, distilled water, RO water where it has nothing in it, I mean, your tree can suffer for some kind of micronutrient deficiencies over the year. So in that kind of trash can, I will put in either I buy like some kind of CalMag micronutrient mix, or I'll just use a liquid fertilizer. And I get, they sell this anywhere, right? Amazon, Home Depot, Walmart. It's these electronic meters. You put it in your water, it'll tell you your TDS, your total dissolved salts. When you stick that in your clean water, right, it should be pretty low, say anywhere from like 5 to 30 the parts per million, or the TDS of stuff in your water. And then I just add in the micronutrients in the fertilizer and bring that number about 100 to 150 during the growing season. And is essentially just ensuring the trees are getting this very small baseline amount of nutrients. Seems to grow pretty healthy with that configuration. So I've kind of stuck with that since.
Very nice. Yeah, I actually use an RO system as well. I have one called a Stealth 300 gallon per per day unit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And mine goes into just a brute trash can as well. I have a float pump on mine, so
Yeah.
it shuts the system off.
Oh yeah, so I forgot to mention that's another thing, because I've had that happen before where I turn my water and right I forgot to shut it off. It's really bad in California. But
Yeah.
I mean, for what I do, I have an inline timer. My RO system, it's a 1000 GPD a gallon per day rated system, which equates at my kind of city water pressure. I can get about 50 gallons in 80 minutes, hour, 20 minutes. So I just got an inline physical timer where I just crank it to 80 minutes and it shuts off when it's full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. That's great. And then do you use some type of submersible pump attached to a hose? Is that how you're watering?
Yeah, that's right.
For the most
And
part?
then I have a
Sweet.
pump in the trash can, and it links up to the water hose. I flip the pump on, and then I can basically run my dosed RO water into my water hose.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I really think that my trees look a lot healthier after switching to RO water.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really happy with it, and I'm going to
Hmm.
continue to do it.
Yeah.
I only am watering a portion of my trees with RO water though, just because I feel kind of bad
Right.
about all the
Yeah.
wastewater,
Yeah.
So I have like my actual bonsai trees in bonsai containers, and my
Hmm.
nice Yamadori, I'll water those with my RO.
Yeah.
The things like little cuttings, air layers that I'm growing out trunks, then I'll just use
Uh-huh.
my regular city water on
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. I would say, sorry, there's a airplane coming over.
No worries.
I would say for deciduous and things that are in refinement, the water quality actually does make a noticeable impact. Otherwise, if it's stuff you're growing, you're in the early stage, it's not that important. One thing that I'm gonna try this year is that I don't think you really need the RO necessary, say like every day of the week. Essentially, the way I look at it is RO is flushing out excess salts building up in the soil, kind of just basically resetting the environment around the roots for the tree. Because when I was living in Oceanside, and I had my RO system then too, but when I was traveling, right, I had my trees on irrigation, and I was just getting the tap water from the city, which was like terrible, right? It was like really high TDS. It smelled kind of like fishy for whatever reason, but some kind of like
Yikes.
weird stuff in there. And so when I was either gone, right, or say I have my trees on irrigation and I water in the morning before work, back then when I still had my non-bonsai job, and I rely on the irrigation to water at those intervals. I knew it would get dry, it just wasn't there in person. And the trees still grew pretty healthy. And essentially that was, not maybe close to like a 50-50 split of getting RO water versus tap water. Um, so I think, especially, yeah, California, we have potential drought concerns. If you can just incorporate it, say like 3 days of the week, right, where you're flushing it and it has your dosing of nutrients, that might be enough, right? I think the trees are more resilient than we think. So my plan this year was to try to cut back on my RO use and see if there's any noticeable difference if I do that.
Very nice. Very nice. One other thing I wonder about, I've done it only a little bit, is collecting rainwater. I feel like that could be another good way for people
Oh
in
yeah,
SoCal
yeah, yeah.
to water their trees.
Hmm. I mean, this year is a exception, right? We've had like the most rain well, I don't know like the inches per year. I mean, definitely at least the last 10-15 years is the most. But in a lot of kind of local areas, like in the mountains and maybe some coastal regions, at least in Southern California, is probably the most rain in like 30 years, or I don't know. It's
It's
it's pretty
crazy. Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. But
Yeah.
on a normal year, right? I mean, if there's like what rain, right? What are you gonna fill your rain
That's true.
buckets with? So I mean, if we could, it'd be pretty nice. But it's not reliable. Yeah.
Totally. Hey, I was curious. So I actually, and this may be a little bit early in the season. I was curious, do you put shade cloth up? And if so, when do you do that for your deciduous?
Yeah, so for where I'm located right now, kind of like in the valleys up in, and I'm still in LA County, but more towards the mountainside. It does get very hot, like in the late spring and summer. I mean, right now, I mean, this year's a little cooler than average, but we're still kind of low 70s. We might get random days here that are in the 80s. Seems to be very mild though, so I have no shade cloth on. Usually from next month, when say we're consistently mid 80s and higher, I'll put on shade cloth. Um, I haven't had the need yet to put it on the trees this month. We do have some individual days like in the high 80s and 90s, but I found kind of like 1 or 2 days that the trees are fine. It'll just tolerate it. So normally I wait till maybe around mid-May or so. I'll throw up the shade cloth.
Nice. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I just put mine on, although I know that I'm a little early on it.
Hmm.
We have a couple days in the 80s, and so I was just like, I just want to make sure I get it on. Better to get it on
Yeah.
than not get it on. I
Uh-huh.
had the time, and so I just went for it. So little early.
Yeah.
The trees have all leafed out already and everything.
Hmm.
But was just curious, what percentage do you use? Like a
I
30
was
or
using
40?
two different grades. Yeah, for the deciduous trees, I think I had 50%. And then conifers, I was using like 30 or 40%. I want to use 30. I just use 40 because that's just like what I had last year. But usually about 30% for the conifers is fine. And deciduous and anything that's kind of sensitive, 50% seems to do the job.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Um, yeah, I I leave my conifers out in full sun all year
Hmm.
round, unless it's a really, super high temp spike, then I may put it under the shade cloth just for the day or something like that.
Hmm.
But I know like Peter has a lot of his conifers under shade cloth because it just gets so
Yeah.
hot up there.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
do the same, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed the trees under conifers, like especially junipers under shade cloth, they turn a touch greener. It's not like the tree is being unhealthy under more sun. They're just compensating by making more chlorophyll, right, and less sunlight. So they look little nicer, a little more
Interesting.
green when you have them under shade cloth.
Yeah,
As long
yeah.
as your
Okay.
trees aren't getting burned, though, that's like the main thing. It seems okay. Yeah.
Definitely the most important factor right there. You don't want to get them burned.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been surprised, even like junipers will get sunburnt if
Oh
the
yeah.
temp
Yeah.
spikes too
Can
high
happen.
and
Yeah.
too hot, which is
Yeah.
very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. What kind of fertilizer do you use, Julian?
So right now, this is how I've been doing it the past year and a half. But I essentially have two layers in my fertilizing regime. One is organic. I'm using Grow Power right now, which is locally to me in Chino. But really, you can it has some humic acid in it. But what I found, most of the commercial organic fertilizers, they're very similar. They're all these animal and plant waste products, right? They'll have kind of alfalfa meal, cottonseed meal, or whatever, something like that. So I more just focus on the NPK ratios. I don't care about the ingredients too much. I will just treat this as a more kind of mild organic, like maybe an equal ratio NPK fertilizer, just something that I know my trees are all getting some kind of baseline nutrition. And then I'll have a second layer on top of that where I use Osmocote, and I'll put Osmocote on the trees that I'm developing something. I needed to grow more. I'm trying to push some kind of branch. And that gives me some kind of control on my fertilizing regime, right? So stuff that I want to keep otherwise healthy, but not necessarily need to grow a lot. I do the organics only. If it's a little bit of the development side, I'll have that kind of base layer of organics and I'll put some Osmocote on top of that. And that has worked well for me the past year and a half. So I've just stuck with that. Occasionally, I'll run liquid fertilizer through my sub pump from the kind of the trash can that I use with the RO system, and maybe here and there, kind of just mass water all the trees with some kind of liquid fertilizer. Overall seems to work for me. So yeah.
Great. That's definitely another advantage that I've learned of using RO with the sub pump and the trash can
Yeah.
setup. So you can just, instead of having to buy a fertilizer injector like a
Yeah.
dosatron, you can
Yeah.
just put your liquid right in that trash can and water. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's like easy and just do everything at once. So yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask how you are managing disease and pests currently? Like
Um,
fungicide, insecticide, are you spraying a lot?
Yeah, so I mean the biggest thing I found before you even apply the chemicals is just keeping your trees as healthy as you can to begin with, and the disease tolerance will just be much better, and you won't see as much stuff show up in your garden. Trying to like cure it's kind of like curing the symptoms versus the cause, right? Fungicides, insecticides, you're addressing the problem after it's emerged. But the better approach, I feel, for any bonsai practitioner is just making sure your trees are set up in a way that it's growing healthy and just more resilient to begin with. Because I don't have too heavy-handed approach of insecticides and fungicides. I'll use some systemics. One is thymol based fungicide. It's like Cleary's, but there's a lot of products that use the same active ingredient. I'll do that kind of just for general fungus issues. I have some imidacloprid. It's a granular systemic insecticide, or they sell granular in liquid forms. That'll be good for kind of like borers or any kind of sap sucking insects on your trees. Occasionally spray with malathion. I seem to not have to use that too much, but that's good for like aphids. I would say the thing where it really matters, right? It's not just keeping the tree healthy. That's like a big deal in Southern California is spider mites, because spider mites love hot, dry climates. Your tree can be perfectly healthy and it can still get spider mites. In that case, I feel it really matters to have a actual dedicated miticide to treat that. So I use Floramite right now. I think it's like $100 for an 8-ounce bottle on Amazon. So a lot of people, they kind of scoff at that, or it's really expensive. I think the dilution ratio is a quarter teaspoon per gallon or something. I mean, so that bottle, can last you whatever 5+ years. If you have a lot of nice trees or junipers, it's kind of a no-brainer investment than letting your trees kind of get set back. So that part definitely matters. Yeah.
That's in a weird way, it makes me feel better that you said spider mites because that's my number one insect issue that I get.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very interesting. Like I only get them on certain trees. So Kishu juniper is like the number one for me. And then I sometimes get them on coast live oak. But I'll have an Itoagawa and a Kishu right next to each other and they'll go for the Kishu.
Yeah.
And I'm probably be if I just let it keep going, they would go after the Itoagawa afterwards. But Kishu, they just go after those ones so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, while we're on the topic of junipers, I was curious, what generally makes you decide to graft on Yamadori or not?
Right. So
talking junipers.
yeah. So the big advantage, or the obvious reasons for grafting is, right, you want a better foliage type. It's more kind of manageable for the purposes of bonsai, and I'll kind of like, right, we should kind of break that down more. Like, what does it mean, right? A foliage is better for bonsai. It's of course there's some aesthetic aspect, right, in how the foliage looks. But I think foliage quality is more relating to this craft aspect of bonsai, where it's not a one-shot deal, right? Where you style the tree and then it just looks good forever, right? Your tree's going to grow, branches are going to change. You can ideally, with the passage of time, your tree should express that age better and better and better. And that has a lot to do with the branching, right? In terms of the ramification. How do you sustain branching that's very old, fine, and dense? And if you can build upon layer and layer and layer of your tree, it just kind of carries this story of time better. So for the issue with junipers and a lot of our native junipers in the US, the foliage is very heavy and coarse. And say, even if we build some part of the tree with it or we style it, it's kind of, this is a weird way to put it, but it's kind of shelf life on the tree is much shorter, in that the structure doesn't hold as long. Your tree will outgrow it. Maybe it will flop. And then this kind of concept, I like to tell people, age and cultivation in your bonsai, right? Not just how physically old your tree is, but how old it is as bonsai and how successfully it conveys that, right? If you work on a tree for 20 years, you want it to showcase that kind of story that it has progressed over 20 years. But say on a very like floppy Rocky Mountain juniper or whatever, and you wired it, looks okay, and maybe in a few years it kind of falls apart and you have to rebuild some parts of it. Even if you work on that tree for 20 years, that kind of cycle of rejuvenation might be a 5 year or shorter year period. So your tree, in a sense, does not appreciate and age as better compared to a chinensis. And this is like not like a knock on like, oh, American foliage sucks and using Japanese. I mean, a good way to think about it is a lot of these high mountain junipers, right? These are kind of semi-arid, high elevation desert climates in the US. And there is much, much less annual precipitation. We compare to Japan, right? This like island in the Pacific, just tons of rain year round. So a foliage type in that very humid, wet climate, right? It can support a very compact, dense, high surface area foliage, right? Like a Kishu Nitoigawa. It's just by nature of the climate, the foliage develops like that and it makes it more suitable for bonsai. Whereas like in the US, if you had such a compact, dense, high surface area foliage, the tree in the native environment probably does not get enough water to actually sustain that naturally. So I think it's just by nature of our regions and climates, we don't have as many suitable foliage types for the purposes of bonsai cultivation and showing this concept of age. It's not that they're bad, right? And they still can look good. I still enjoy some native foliage types. But for me, there is some kind of middle ground where one, of course, you have your natural character of the tree, but how can we progress it as bonsai more? Which often is just better, right, with the grafted material. Another thing that I find kind of funny on this concept is some people they'll tell me, right, they don't like grafting because it's like disrespecting the tree or whatever, and right, it's not natural. I mean, bonsai is like so far from natural. It is very manipulated, and we kind of impose our value set and kind of aesthetic on it, and we ripped it out from nature and whatever. And of course Yamadori is amazing. I have some Yamadori as well, but I think if it's because you feel it's kind of dishonoring the tree, then it's probably you shouldn't have even dug it out, right? So I mean, I have kind of no issue with that, and I like to graft. I think it's better, and you end up with a better tree.
This is a fun topic. I enjoy thinking about it,
Yeah.
and it's fun to hear different opinions on it. Some people are very much, hey, I absolutely will not graft ever. Some people are, I graft every single tree.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate and enjoy hearing your perspective on it. I think where I'm at personally is I like variety, and uh, I have quite a few junipers, partly because I've collected quite a few Sierra junipers, but I like to have a little of each. So
Yeah.
kind of the way that I've divided things up in my mind is if I have a smaller tree, it's generally pretty hard for me to keep
That's right.
that
Yeah.
larger, native foliage on it and create something that a design that works well for me. So I've generally tended to graft smaller trees with Itoigawa, Kishu, or Fudo, which I want
Yeah.
to talk to you about in a sec.
Yeah.
However, like with larger trees, it also kind of depends on the foliage quality of the specific tree because there's
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
genetic diversity.
Hmm.
Some of our Sierras, for example, they have a really nice foliage and nice color. They don't have the little pollen sacs,
Hmm.
and it grows relatively tight. So what I've kind of started doing is rating them on like a 1 to 10 scale. So, this Sierra is a 8 in the foliage quality, 10 being perfect, 1 being totally horrible.
Yeah.
And so larger trees, if it's like an 8 or above, I will keep the foliage. Otherwise, I graft.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in continuing to find better qualities of foliage on our native trees, like by collecting. And I think it would be really cool if we actually grafted, like the best quality Rocky Mountain juniper onto a Rocky Mountain juniper. I think that could be really cool. haven't seen a ton of that occurring yet, but
Hmm.
it makes me excited about the future and to see what happens, what we do in the future with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree on that aspect of if you have a bigger tree, right, the coarser foliage can look in proportion with it. And if it's the right relative scale, then it can look pretty nice. But yeah, smaller stuff like say like Chuhin size and below, or even a little bit bigger than Chuhin, I will almost always graft it. But if it's like a much larger tree, then I can see the argument being made to keep it native. One kind of yeah, I haven't really seen people taking because like Itogawa in Japan, right? So it's like a cultivated a variety from nature. So of course, why couldn't we do that with Rockies and other varieties? Um, I mean, I've seen some more compact Rocky Mountain junipers that essentially it's like a coarse Itoigawa. It's like the same color as Itoigawa, but it's the foliage type's just coarser. From what I've seen, when they're healthy, it grows pretty compact and turgid. But if the tree is in any kind of state of non-vigor or stress, you do still get that floppiness, even with the compact foliage. The other issue, and this is kind of relates to what I was talking about of our foliage types for kind of the natural high elevation, semi arid climates in the US, is that these foliage types are much slower growing compared to a Kishu Nitogawa, which is used to that kind of abundance of moisture in their natural environment. They can tolerate this denser foliage and faster growing rate. So for a lot of our kind of native species, the physical growth is just slower as well. So then what that translates to, if you're scion grafting or something like that, your margin of error is just going to be, it has to be much smaller. Say you're putting in your scion and you fudge the lineup, the cambiums are all messed up. I mean, you might get some leeway on a Chinensis variety, but I think on a slower growing native juniper, it's much more likely for that graft to fail. So I think it's just harder to do as well.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Uh, cool. And then, yeah, so I saw that you grafted Fudo, which is not super common. I haven't seen that a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
Although, and I don't know where I got my Fudo originally. I'm pretty sure I bought it on eBay. Like I bought a little uh, whip like many years ago, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is interesting. It's a little more blue." And
Yeah.
I saw
Yeah.
that you grafted some Rocky Mountain junipers with it. I grafted one Sierra with Fudo,
Uh-huh.
and so far, I mean, I think it's going to be a really cool foliage
Oh
type
yeah.
to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
How has your experience been with it for
I
grafting?
mean, I got the kind of raw material. It was from Ed Clark a few years ago, and when I saw it, I mean, I didn't know what Fudo was. I was just like, oh, this is like a really blue Juniper chinensis, and the coarseness quality, right? Is it's like a very good Kishu. It's like nice and dense. I mean, maybe even a little finer than Kishu, so great foliage characteristic. Seems to grow very hardy, so kind of no health issues with it. Initially, I got it because I mean I liked that kind of Sierra blue, Rocky Mountain blue color. I mean it's not like a kind of brighter blue like Sierra, but it can get pretty close. Um, and initially, my idea was to offer that to the kind of non-grafting purists, right, who like poo-poo and all the chinensis, because it looks more similar to our native foliage color. So I found that you can get that quality of a chinensis, but somewhat maintain that tone and color of a native foliage. It looks really good, grows very well. So I've been grafting. I have a kind of Shohin Sierra Juniper and that kind of Rocky Mountain I posted. I've been grafting those. Seems to take well. It's developing. So I think it's a great foliage type. Hope to see it more on some trees.
Yeah, that's rad, and I would love to at someday because I haven't actually seen yours in person, but we
Uh-huh.
could compare side by side. I'm curious if mine actually is
No,
Fudo
I
or
gave Peter a plant last year, a
Oh,
Fudo.
sweet.
It was from Ed, and I'm pretty sure it's the same as what I have. So yeah,
Nice. Nice. Very
yeah,
cool. I'll look at his.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a man of variety. Variety
Uh-huh.
is definitely the spice of life, and
Yeah.
so I want a few different types of juniper personally. That's just my thing. So, okay, I have some kind of wacky ideas that I want to run by you for SoCal specifically.
Yeah.
Well, actually, so one question I have: have you seen people graft black pine onto ponderosa and then keep it long term in SoCal? Like, have you
So
seen
I mean that
that
part,
actually be successful?
yeah, I'm not sure, right? I mean, I think it's kind of a newish, by newish, like 10 to 15 years that people have really been grafting black pine on ponderosa. So we don't have a lot of examples of like really nice refined trees, right? And because there is some concern with the long-term matching, right, of the rootstock to graft material. I mean, grafts can fail over time, even if they take. Um, I mean, I mentioned the other professional, John Wong, before, and when he was more active as a professional, he used to buy a lot of really nice ponderosas from Randy Knight, and he was grafting a lot of those. And some of them seem to take. One thing and this is I'm still trying to test this out myself. I'm not sure that I think at least during the grafting process, right, your tree still needs the dormancy until that black pine is like really established on there. I mean, just for the understock to grow healthy, your tree still should be overwintering. Because I think before John, he had some, a lot of grass that took, and then some years he would board the tree at his place. He used to board with some other professionals before, or Boone when he was at Valley Springs. But it seemed like on the years that the tree either got shocked from some kind of stressor or didn't get the dormancy, those grafts started to get rejected. So I got one of the ponderosas that is my customer's tree, but he had it with John, and it was boarded at Boone's Place in Valley Springs before. I mean, that tree was almost dead a few years ago, and it was attempted grafted before, and all of them failed. So I mean, I wasn't even sure if the tree was going to live. So when I took over that tree, I mean, I boarded it at Peters, right, just to give it some semblance of a winter dormancy. I think after that first year of dormancy, and then we grafted the same season of, right after the boarding period, it seemed to grow, much healthier. I mean, the ponderosa foliage came out healthier, and then the grafts, they kind of just stood there. I wasn't sure if they took, and this was actually my dad, but I brought the tree back again this following winter to board at Peter's place, and I forgot to take off like the old pear film from last year on some grass, right? So it kind of just sat there for another winter, very cold, wet California winter, and a lot of those center buds, they rotted out, and I was like, oh shit, like just destroyed the grass on my customers' trees, and I brought the tree back to where I am right now, and all of them, most of them all started growing. So even though the center bud rotted out, at the base of all the needles, they're all pushing new candle buds. So I was shocked. I thought those were a goner for sure. So I think just getting that consistent dormant period ongoing with the grafting process seems to be much more robust. But in terms of the long term, and say like 10 years, right? Because 5 years, I think even 5 years is too short to really know. I'm not sure if it's viable or not. There's no way but to just try it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of professionals say that it can be done. Like a pine will take on the characteristics of the foliage type.
Hmm.
So if you graft a ponderosa with black pine, it will live in SoCal.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen anyone have like own that for long periods of time.
No, yeah, yeah.
So if anyone is out there and they have it, please
Uh-huh.
show it to me.
Well, I know, Danny Martinez, right? He's at the Santa Barbara Club, and I just saw him at the workshop. I know he has one black pine grafted ponderosa. I think it's from Ryan. I mean, he's had it a good number of years, maybe like 5 years. I don't know if like 10 years, but at least for the time he had it, I mean, it seems to be okay. I mean, he could be somebody to ask to see how it's been going.
Cool.
But it seems possible, just not that many examples, like long-term examples. I mean, so just
Yeah.
time will tell, and we'll know how robust it is.
Yeah. Time will tell. Time will tell. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I mean, Ponderosa is definitely in my top three of all different types of trees. I love
Yeah.
Ponderosa. I have one at Peter's house, and I'm grafting it with black pine. Really hoping that I can
Oh
keep it at my
yeah.
house.
I mean
Um,
that tree is the one you have. That's like an insane trunk. I mean, if you got that one fully black pine and strong, I mean that's like a show winner tree. It just has like, I mean, the presence. If you can have, say, the impact and presence of a Yamadori, right? Like during the Pacific Expo, there's Randy Knight's Ponderosa, right? That got the best in show. So if you can have that kind of presence in terms of the age and kind of that raw character of the tree, but then that kind of cultivation aspect of bonsai, right? If you have both of those together, those are like shoe in show winners usually. I mean, they do very well generally. Um, so
Thank you
hopefully
very
that works
much.
out.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm crossing all my fingers and my toes. And
yeah.
shout out Backcountry Bonsai for letting me buy that tree from them.
Oh
I love
yeah,
that tree
yeah.
for sure. Cool. Yeah, I mean, if that does work, I feel like I don't know, in the future, like 30 years from now, I could see bonsai professionals that are outside of the area in climates where it actually gets cold during the winter,
Hmm.
maybe getting a bunch of ponderosa and other types of pine and grafting them for people in SoCal,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's like their business model.
Could I mean
They
it
just sell
could
those.
be, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, one thing I'm thinking about and kind of playing with is there's a native pine called bishop pine,
Uh-huh.
and the needles are not as long. Like they're probably a fourth ish the size of ponderosa or so. They're pretty small,
Yeah.
and it's a very hardy pine, nice green straight needle. And kind of another thought that I have is purchasing Yamadori from someone like Randy Knight or the Backcountry Bonsai and grafting bishop pine on it, just to have something else besides black pine
Yeah.
in SoCal.
Uh-huh. Oh, one other Yamadori pine that may not actually need a dormant period is pinyon pines, because we do actually have some old one. I'm like been in SoCal for decades, right? And because the range of the pinyon pine, it goes all the way down to like Baja, Mexico. So they tolerate seemingly, right, the lack of I mean, they're kind of like a mid-elevation tree, so they still grow in kind of cold-ish areas. But one of my customers, and he's kind of like in a foothill area, not terribly high elevation, something like 1,700 feet. He has this pinyon pine that, well, he bought it from Tom Vong, right, one of our collectors down here, and he took it down from the mountains, and he had it where he is in Orange County for like 3 years. That even that on its own, right, I don't know if it's like good or not, because pines, especially old collected material, they can stay kind of just in limbo for a bit, just not doing anything, and it'll just suddenly die, right? So I was very nervous, right? I was like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna work out. We'll just try it out. So he brought it to his place. I mean, he gets a touch colder than where I am, so kind of a dormant period, but not like a hard freeze or anything. And well, it's been like another 3 years since then, and the tree is still alive and it's healthy. It's been growing.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
great.
like over like, at least 6 years, maybe 7 years from the mountain now, and seems to be okay. So that's another thing worth for the collectors out there, right? To worth pursuing in terms of offering Yamadori for more mild climates. Pinyon pines could be a candidate.
Very nice, very nice, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we get some more pinyon pine, and would love to try one out. Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, and so Julian, I don't know how much time you have, so if at
Oh, I
any
mean,
time
I'm
you
I'm
go,
fine. Can
okay.
go to
Well, I'm
whenever.
gonna keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah, and if you need
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
bounce out, that's totally cool. Cool. Why don't we talk a little bit about oaks? I was really curious to pick your brain about oaks because I saw you doing some cool stuff with them.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I guess oaks are a tree that I'm very interested in. I was thinking about it the other day, and I think that coast live oak is probably the tree that I've seen the most. Like I've probably seen the most of them, and I've seen them the most frequently out of any other tree in my entire life, just
Yeah.
because they grow all over the place down in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties.
Hmm.
And at my house now, there's like 15 mature coast live oaks, and I've just always loved oaks. I think they're beautiful, majestic trees. They can get really old. They have cool bark and just beautiful trees all around. Have you been experimenting with coast live oak primarily? Is that the species that you've been working with?
Yeah, I mean, I have both coast life oaks and cork oaks. I mean, I treat them pretty much the same. I mean, great species for bonsai. I mean, very hardy. It has a good ability to kind of reduce its inner node size. Of course, and good for these mild, kind of hotter climates. So around, right, a great species for bonsai. Looks great, robust, has nice bark and age. They're long-lived deciduous species as well. So I really enjoy them. I've been kind of messing with a few and growing them since I started as a hobbyist. Yeah.
Sweet. Nice. Any horticultural tips you like for oaks? Do you do you just what soil type do you use also?
Um, so this is like an experiment the last 2 years. I cannot say definitively if it makes a huge difference or not, but I started putting a little bit of Kanuma in my oak mixes just because I heard some of the professionals did that for their cork oaks. I wasn't initially sure of the full story of why they use Kanuma for the cork oaks. One possibility is, say, like in Spain, in some sections, it can be very similar to Southern California, very kind of alkaline, hard water. So if you use a more acidic soil, I mean, it can help mitigate that by basically, it's more of like the environment around your soil that matters more, right? If you can get that kind of water or soil environment by the roots in that lower pH range, it can help have a better balance of accessible nutrients, right, like iron and whatnot. But if you have already clean water to begin with or using RO, I don't know how much it matters. But I thought I just tried anyways because it seemed it wouldn't hurt. So I subbed in a small percentage of the Akadama, replaced it with Kanuma in my oak mixes. I mean, it's been over 2 seasons I've been doing that, and they grow very healthy. There's no issues. At least I don't see any downsides to using it. So tentatively, I just kind of keep that as my oak mix. Other than that, very robust. One thing I do in terms of my repotting for oaks, I prefer to repot them early instead of, say, right when the buds swell and the leaves come out. What I have found is that, I mean, when they do start growing, they move water very fast. So if you repot on the tail end of the window or very late, sometimes your tree can get like transpiration stress where it's just losing too much moisture from the leaves relative to what you cut off from the roots, and it will actually slow the tree down, get some kind of shock. I found if you repot them early, even before the buds start moving, they respond perfectly fine, had no issues. So I tend to do kind of, well, in Southern California, it'd be like early January to mid-January before they really get going. Seems to work, at least in my area. So I've kind of stuck with that for now. You also can do some defoliation with oaks. Generally, I find there's just only two windows to do it. One is at the start of the year when the tree will already kind of, I mean, not all the leaves drop at once, but they'll start shedding their leaves after they're about a year, year and a half old. So you can just kind of force it and cut them off at the tail end of that window. So kind of early spring, end of winter. Just gives you a little bit more control to see the branch structure, cut things back, and try to, because you don't want to just kind of topiary prune and hedge the tree, right? You want to build. That's like another discussion, right? We talk about building deciduous branches. So it just gives you a little bit more control over that. I found if your trees are very strong and vigorous growing, you can do it again, usually early summer, around June. The tree will grow back again very strongly. Other than that, I pretty much treat them the same as other kind of broadleaf or deciduous trees in terms of just cutbacks and building branches. Overall, though, a great species to work with, very hardy, and they look awesome too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very nice. I'll have to experiment with some Kanuma. I've just used Akadama and pumice, which has worked well, but
Yeah.
always worth experimenting with. And I've heard about some professionals using Kanuma, so I like that idea. That's cool. Nice. What do you think about the oak style in bonsai?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, I really like that, because I mean, I drive so many times, like the past like year, 2 years, just going over the Grapevine Gorman's Pass, and I drive all the way down and back the 5 and 99 so many times. So and recently, especially this year, I'm going on the 101 on the coast. So I see all those. A lot of them are valley oaks. They have these great cascading branches, and for me, the oak form, right, looks a lot like some of the Penjing bonsai, where there's this kind of emphasis on directional pruning and building your primary line. So essentially, your primary branch line carries a lot of changes in direction, a lot of visual interest and visual weight, which is kind of like our oaks in their natural habitat, because wood is very dense, branches are heavy, they kind of sag and taper down, or maybe some older parts rot and die out, right? And they'll send a new directional line which grows, and you kind of repeat that pattern many times, right? And you'll have very impressive tree forms where that kind of core primary, secondary branch structure, right, has a lot of interesting lines and this repetitionist shape, which for me kind of is similar to some Penjing bonsai. I think on my blog I showed some examples. It might have been a bougainvillea that had this really broad canopy, but it looks very much like a valley oak. So I think it's a totally legit aesthetic, something we can make in our trees.
Yeah. And I am also a big fan of the oak style. Do you think, I mean, I guess, is there no trees that really grow like that in Japan
You,
in nature? I'm not an expert on
yeah,
how trees
I don't
grow
know.
in
Yeah,
the
because
natural environment.
the oaks that I've seen in Japan, and they do have both deciduous and evergreen oaks. I mean, they seem just more upright in growth habit, not that kind of stout, kind of really gnarled branch form. I don't know. I mean, at least like in the part of Japan I was in, I did not see trees with that kind of characteristic. Maybe possible in other areas of Japan. Yeah.
And the only reason I ask is I don't really I see a broom style, kind of like a modified broom style in
Yeah,
Japan, but
yeah.
not like a true oak style.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's something that I am very interested in, and I
Mhm.
like to create my oaks in like an oak style, and I'm excited to see the future of oak trees as bonsai in the U.S. I like them also in like more of a traditional bonsai shape,
Yeah.
but really love the oak style.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. I agree.
Nice. I saw that you did some thread grafting with
Hmm.
oaks.
Yeah.
Was that is that six? Like I haven't seen a lot of
Yeah.
people do
Yeah.
root. I think
So
you said did root grafting too, right?
Um, I think not on an oak,
No.
the root grafting, but I did try thread grass on an oak. I mean, I figured as long as you time the defoliation of the branch, where I mean, of course, it would have to grow, right? You need to ensure it's strong enough that here, and save you only defoliate the one branch you thread graft, and you leave leaves on everything else. A lot of times that branch is not going to grow because your tree is seeking the path of least resistance to grow. So why would it grow on this branch you just cut when there's all these other healthy tips around it? But if you can time it right with the defoliation where you know it's going to grow, I mean, it seems it can work. I mean, I first tried it on some of my own oaks, and the graft did grow, but it ultimately failed. And because the site that I cut the graft, the thread hole on, even though the cut was very clean and well sealed, it's like the oak just doesn't want to callus. It doesn't form, like in the sense if you look at a maple, right? The oaks, even when you try to heal big wounds, right? They much easier for it to recede than actually callousing. But I tried again on one of my customers' trees. I was like, well, just give it a shot. I mean, not going to hurt. And that one actually seems like it's taking. It seems not as reliable as maples just because of the growth characteristic of the tree. When it gets some kind of trauma on the bark branch or whatever, right? It's not a kind of very easily callus producing species. So possible, but not reliable.
Man, props for attempting. I think that's awesome. I
Oh
don't see a lot
yeah,
of people
just wanted
thread
to
grafting
see.
oaks. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
yeah,
Maybe I mean I'm sure if you could get the tree just really pumping, super
yeah. If
vigorous, you'd
it's
probably have
strong,
better
then
success.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but I'm glad you went for it. And I think, hey, why not? Like, let's figure out what is doable and what's not doable with oak.
yeah.
And I know we're talking about coast live oak, but with all the
Hmm.
oaks, valley oak is awesome as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Um, I'm also kind of interested in scrub oak,
Uh-huh.
just because they have really small little leaves, and I think
Yeah,
they
yeah.
could be
I've seen
cool
some
for
of
like
those. Yeah.
smaller trees. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's this guy in the Santa Barbara Club. His name was Joe. I forgot his last name. But anyways, older gentleman, and he has a lot of oak trees that he all grew from acorn. Like every time I go up there for a workshop, he's like, "Oh, I don't have to tell you, but all these trees are older than you." Right, he grew from acorn for like 50
Yeah,
years. Very impressive. And they're, of
that's
course, yeah, his
rad.
old trees now. I think he had a scrub oak. He had some like interesting trees, which he grew himself from scratch, right? Which was very
Yeah,
impressive.
that's so
But I
cool.
think they can make nice bonsai.
I would love to see his collection someday.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
very cool. Yeah, what about air layering? Have you tried to air layer coast
You know,
live
I
oak?
I have not. I mean, I've heard kind of like mixed results on that. I mean, I don't have my own personal experience. I mean, I think it's possible, especially if the branch or whatnot is very strong. I don't see why it shouldn't work because, I mean, just the concept of air layering, right? You're cutting off that cambium, you're forcing the tree to build up more kind of sugar and callus there, and that trapping all the hormones. I mean, at some point, as long as you protect that cut, it should grow roots. Doesn't, I mean, I think it can be done, but I haven't tried it.
Yeah, gotcha. It seems like with air layering, it's like about how young the tissue is and then how
Yeah.
vigorous it is. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
down here, George Muranaka, bonsai nursery in Napomo,
Uh-huh.
they air layer black pines, and his success rate's like super high.
Yeah.
But he's just air layering the top of the like a brand new candle.
Yeah,
He air
that's
layers
right.
that part.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Whereas if you try and air layer like a super old black pine, I mean, like
It's like not guaranteed.
it's gonna
Yeah.
go, yeah, downhill
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, one reason so I've collected a few coast live oaks.
Uh-huh.
Um, just got poison oak the last time I did, which was not cool. But
Yeah.
I see a lot of them with really bulbous bases.
Hmm.
So a lot of coast live oaks, and then they just have this like pineapple base at the bottom. But
Yeah.
then there's no nabari like right off of that. It's all under.
Yeah.
It's like usually a big tap root.
Uh-huh.
And I just think if you could collect that big bulbous base and
Yeah.
then either air layer or graft roots along that base, you just
Mhm.
have such a killer base, and that it would be
Yeah.
really cool to make oak bonsai like
I mean,
that.
I think it's possible, especially like ground layers where it's already kind of bark or cambium that's been moist and underground a lot. I mean, it should be easier to produce roots from those sections. I think it's just making sure the tree is robust and healthy. But I think the ground layers seem more realistic than air layering. I see that being possible.
For sure. Cool. One thing that I have found with oak is like, and I don't know why I'm doing this, but so at my house there's like 15 oaks, so I always get these acorns, and they just volunteer little oak seedlings.
Yeah.
So I started doing seedling cutting technique, like on
Uh-huh.
black pine, in the
With the
Bonsai Today.
acorns. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it totally works. Like
Oh,
you just
okay.
dip it in some rooting hormone,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you'll get nice radial nabari
Wow.
shooting out. So
Yeah.
you can do that, which
Yeah.
is cool for creating,
Yeah.
creating trees.
Because I
Totally
would
fun.
I was always wondering because if it's like a fresh like acorn seedling and it's the roots are still connected to the acorn, right? It's relying on that as its kind of nutrient source, and you do a kind of seedling cutting on that. I didn't know if it was gonna just wither up and die because you just cut off its food source. But that's cool to know that works.
So one thing, and I can't so I'm very non-scientific when I when I have
Yeah.
been doing these. I have been cutting it below the actual acorn, which
Uh-huh.
I guess is like feeding
Oh,
it,
okay.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
above it as well.
Yeah.
And I like some of them do die.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
so unfortunately, I'm not giving you a great answer, but it's doable. I
This is
can't remember if
possible.
it's
Yeah.
below
Yeah.
or above
Yeah.
the acorn, but
Uh-huh.
it does work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Oh, and then one last thing about oaks is I remember you saying, or maybe some pictures where you had the branches like coming down and touching the ground, which I
Mhm.
thought was just cool and an
Yeah.
interesting idea because I see that out in in nature.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to try that out. I mean, of course, you need a very strong low branch, right? Letting it run a lot and basically try to get it a self ground layer. I just like the idea of because, right, that's like a or oak form you can actually see where you just have these really thick, heavy primary branches rooted into the ground. Trees like that exist in Penjing, but with different species where they have these very wild and interesting trunk to root branch relations. There are trees like that already exist, not an oak species. But I don't see why it couldn't work. I mean, you just grow a very strong low branch and kind of layer it on the bottom and just keep it a part of the composition can look very interesting. So something to try out.
I love it, man. Great job experimenting with that, and that's really fun to play around with. Nice work.
Yeah.
Sweet. Cool, cool. So kind of my last topic that I wanted to hit on with you, if that's cool,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
on your blog post. I really
Uh-huh.
enjoyed your blog post. I definitely recommend everyone go check it out. What's your website again?
It's justbonsai.com.
Great name.
Yeah.
Great name.
Yeah, it's from
Justbonsai.com.
my dad. He's gave me that name to
Awesome.
use it, and just simple, easy to remember. So yeah,
It's solid. I love it. Nice work. Um, yeah, so yeah, you did a great post on deciduous bonsai, creating and growing branches on ramification.
hmm
The title of the blog post was "Why Did I Cut Off All the Branches?"
yeah,
So I was hoping you could maybe kind of just summarize some of the key points there. And I'll start it off by saying, so why did you cut off all the branches on your trident maple?
Yeah.
Because it looked pretty nice, to I think a
Yeah,
lot
it
of
had,
people would
had
say.
some kind of tree form, seemed reasonably mature. So, at first that's kind of like, in a sense I did, right? I set the tree back, but with the idea to improve it to something better. So, I'll kind of first give some context and how I see a lot of new deciduous trees and work out there being made. And in a sense, I feel many people try to apply the methodology we use on conifers, right? Junipers, wire and style them, maybe some little bit of pruning to design our deciduous trees. But just the nature of the tree is different. It's very hard to build your trees that way. If we wire our branches on a deciduous tree, right? And you can still wire it to change some lines and directions, but say wiring as a styling method to build your tree. At best, you add some movement in your tree or some general shape. Generally, when you have wire on the tree, though, on the branches, the branch lines will have more contrast, so it might look very, interesting when it's fully wired out. But your core kind of, how do I put it, like the reality, the structure of the tree, right? It's the same. Wire does not add or remove branches, right? We are just repositioning lines on a tree. So kind of then my whole concept I was trying to give across in that blog post was just showing how do we build branches that, one, in part character. They show scaling of the tree. So, relative to the trunk, how do we get our internode size shorter and have more ramification, right? Just as we look at, any of the oaks off the highway or any deciduous tree outside, right? For say like a 70-foot tall tree, it's probably like 5,000 plus branches on that tree. And if you want to maintain that sense of scale and stature, right, on bonsai on a smaller tree, like who is to say that you could not have also 5,000 branches on your small tree? In theory, if the scaling of the branches relative to the trunk is perfect, if you show somebody a photo of that tree, they should have no idea how big it is. And generally, I find the best bonsai have that perfect sense of scale. Their presence in person just has much more impact when those elements making the design are just much better in proportion. So I kind of broke that article down into 3 sections where cutbacks generally produce 3 things on, 2 things on deciduous trees, and the third part, which is kind of like a background relating to it. The first was like that graft you mentioned, where we need to accommodate space as we build out our tree to build ramification. So the kind of way I portrayed that, I had this essentially exponential graph where, say, we cut a branch, it bifurcates. We go from 2 branches, you cut it, it bifurcates again, 4, 8, 16, so forth. You keep on repeating that process, right? Your gain of branches, right, is exponential. You can have a very high density of branches as you reach that outer silhouette. So the whole point of that is when you begin your branch building process, and this is more on the principle, right? Because the technique will then depend on the species, how you're managing the internodes. There's definitely more to be said there. So this is kind of just very broadly just on the principle. As you're building your branches, if you can accommodate essentially many layers of cutbacks, starting with a smaller tree and growing outwards, you have essentially many opportunities to increase branch density versus, say, we have some tree, right? There's some branches on it. We wire it to make it some nice kind of lines, and you maintain that tree just by cutting the periphery on the outside. Your ability to gain density is it's exponentially lower, actually, because we are not accommodating layers to build more branching, if that kind of makes sense. So it's kind of starting smaller and building outwards to your, and this is nothing to do with aesthetic, right? This is, you can have many different aesthetic approaches with this concept, but it's the idea of that you are not realizing your finished look in the tree in a very early stage, but you start your tree smaller, and through addition of cutbacks, right, you build it out to that size, gaining branches as you do so. So that was kind of like, I felt a very underlooked aspect of a lot of deciduous work I see, where we try too much to treat them like a juniper, wire some branches, make it look nice, whatever. But the reality is, maintaining trees that way, maybe you get some nice lines in it, but your branches get coarser and coarser. You eventually have to cut back anyways to soften the outer silhouette. And in the long term, your tree actually doesn't improve. So for me, it's where you get too hung up on that kind of immediate image that you prevent that kind of long-term potential from being realized. And for me, that's the kind of like lesser quality of deciduous bonsai. The second aspect, and this is relating to penjing, and we kind of talked about, the oak form, is creating movement in primary branch lines. So we have some kind of branch, right, and a deciduous branch, and we cut it. We always have a lateral bud, right, alternating or symmetric. That lateral bud guarantees that when you cut it from that new emergent bud, you have some change in direction in your branch line. So for as many cutting intervals as you have as growing the new branch, your branch can have a small change in direction. So if you look at a lot of like nice penjing trees, and I have some examples in the blog, I mean, if you compare your primary branch line, right, compared to maybe some of the Japanese bonsai or deciduous trees, there's just much more aggressive in that you see all this crazy contortion and movement in the branch line. It carries a lot of kind of character and visual interest, and some of them look very much like oaks. And that's more to show the concept of that when you build out your branch structure, you can create movement and interest through the cutbacks, right? Versus if you wire a branch, even your very best compact bend, right, is going to be some kind of arc. You can't physically wire sharp angular bends in a deciduous branch. It seems like counterintuitive, right? Like, why would you want sharp bends? But you're doing this as you're developing the tree. So, the branches will thicken, the corners will soften out. And in the end, through this cutback process, right, your branches just have way more movement than if you wired them out versus cutting it and building out. So there's kind of a twofold advantage, right? Just one, actually getting more branches, which lends to that sense of scaling on the tree, making it have more presence as a kind of large, small tree per se. And then this concept of building movement in your primary branches. And I feel there's a whole like range in between there where, and that's like through the professional's discretion or their philosophy or whatever, how aggressive that movement should be, or should it be more pure on just the ramification side, right? If we look at, I think I showed a picture of a Broom's Alcova, right? Very old, soft, refined tree, but not a lot of movement in the branches, right? Just a lot of density. So I think the aesthetic approach is a little bit different, but it's showing that there's this way we can manipulate the look of the tree, right, in that development and growing process, which is realized over time. But I think in the end, you have just such better, higher quality trees than just trying to do this whole kind of style a wire deciduous tree. I think you just end up with very poor quality, just diluted bonsai. That was kind of like my approach and kind of my thought process, especially after seeing Peter, right, the last few years, how he's building his trident maples. And I was like, wow, like even for, a young tree in a sense, and it's still, of course, not that young, a lot of work into it. I mean, it's very, very fine branching, extreme amount of density when we compare to many deciduous trees we see in the US. And then I kind of contrasted that with, we have a penjing curator at the Huntington Gardens here in Southern California. People here just call him Mr. Che, but he is very skilled, does great work. And he originally learned in China, and and he has like this great it's like this lignon penging style. And the aesthetic is different, where the primary lines, right, have different movement, but they're similarly very dense. And it's just that control of, are you cutting for ramification or cutting for movement? And the professional can right, you can decide, or the hobbyist grower or whatever, what they want to realize for the look of the tree. For me, that's the big potential in deciduous bonsai, where you can have a full range of styles and aesthetics and qualities in the branching, that I think is not really realized yet in the U.S.
Solid, man.
Yeah, sorry, that was like really long.
Well,
There's a bunch to talk about.
that was fantastic, man. So many great points there that you hit. And I really like your approach to building ramification on deciduous, and it's very similar to Peter's. I'm so impressed with his trident maples that
Oh
he's
yeah,
been able to what he's been able to accomplish in a relatively short amount of time.
yeah.
Um, those points, he hits a lot of those points as well, and I've learned from him. One of the main things that I kind of made me realize the way to achieve a super ramified deciduous tree is to start the divisions close to the trunk, right?
Yeah.
Because you only have a certain amount of distance until you hit the silhouette.
Yeah.
And so, the closer that you have them to the trunk, the more divisions you can get. And your chart was really cool to think about. It was almost like compounding interest.
Yeah.
How you keep cutting, getting more and more divisions, 2 turns into 4, 4 turns into 8, and so on and so forth. And I think you laid all that out fantastically. So definitely go check that article out if you haven't.
Yeah.
Sweet, man. Well, hey, we just officially hit, we're 2 minutes less than 2 hours. For me, it flew by. Really enjoyed talking to you. I think I need to help my wife get to bed right now.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Great to talk. Look forward to seeing how your podcast develops.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really excited to get them going. I hope that they turn out really well. I think that they will eventually. I don't think I'm the greatest host right now, but I will always keep trying to improve. And I'm putting myself out there and hoping that I will get better little by little over time and become a better host. But I'm excited for this project, and you are absolutely awesome. Where can people follow you
I'm
right now?
Instagram. It's bonsai TSA. It's like a play on my last name, but bonsai _ you can find me on my website, justbonsai.com. I have a page on Facebook under the same name, but if you just type my name, you'll find me there because I post work there pretty often. But yeah, just contact me on any of those platforms or shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to reply.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. If you could stick on just for 1 sec, I'm gonna stop this now. But really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Julian. You're the man, dude. Thanks so much.